and a very good morning and welcome to Newsline, live from the Newsfirst studios right here in Dawson Road in Colombo on what is a warm but wet morning. And joining me is Bandula Jayasekara, former diplomat and senior journalist. And good morning to you.
Good morning, Faraz.
And how are you?
How could it be wet and warm?
It is, and it's a brilliant shirt you've got, and it's blue.
But it's a blue, you're also wearing blue.
Indeed, the boy's in blue. And joining us also, having agreed to get up very early, is senior legal man, Gomin Daisiri. And very good morning to you, Mr. Daisiri.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Bandula.
And how are you today?
I see I'm against the boys in blue.
Indeed. And you've been up watching the rugby, haven't you?
That's right.
And Sri Lanka has awoken to the news today, which was late yesterday, that the former chief minister in the East, Mr. Pillian, has been arrested for a murder that took place in 2005. It seems that the law is catching up, the long arm of the law.
Yeah, that's why they call it long arm, the law after several years.
Yeah. But I hope that the FCID are not going to take so long on various other matters.
I don't think that's really what is worrying people for us, because they want to know, they won't have results, but there's still a media spectacle. That's what is happening.
We have reports that the senior most person at the FCID, the senior DIG, Ravi Y. De Lankara, has just returned from London, where he was following a sort of a training session with a serious fraud office in England.
But then what's happening to the Presidential Commission? There is another commission, there are two, so that's
Indeed.
What is confusing.
That's right, it appears to be confusing, though I think that the Presidential Commission of Inquiry deals with a very limited, when I say very limited, it's from 2005 to 2015 January. So in essence, the Rajapaksa years is what they're looking at. But nothing seems to have come
consider is biased? It should, go back.
I think it should go back to the year dot if something's happened.
Since 1994.
Yes, if there's no statute of limitations. Perhaps we can ask Mr. Gomin that. Is there a statute of limitations on these matters, like abuse of power and so on?
No, because those are not known offences as such.
Right.
So those things could be investigated by some authority with timeless.
Right, okay. So they're timeless. We also have this issue where, shall we call it the avant-garde matter, in which the Navy commander has now confirmed that their investigation is readied, and the Ministry of Defence will be sent this thing. I think that we have reports. We had the Secretary to the Ministry of Defence, Mr. Karnasena Hettiarachchi, who told me a few days ago that actually he admitted to a failing on the part of the Ministry of Defence, and that permission had been given for this vessel to go back into Galle Harbour, where they had been initially refused permission because it was carrying arms.
But one report says, in one of the newspapers says that it belongs to the shipping corporation. I saw one newspaper report.
Yes, it may well be the legal ownership of the vessel may be with that, but they may have entered into a charter party with this company, and quite legally, rather like we taking a car on lease, where it's possibly owned by one of the finance companies. We mustn't mention names, should we?
Sometimes we should, because that's really what the people want. They want to, so why don't we name names?
That's now, you bring up a very interesting matter, and perhaps, Mr. Gomin, you may give us your thoughts and counsel on this. In the matter of I don't think we should mention the name because this matter is in court, but in the matter of a former parliamentarian who's a close aide of President Rajapaksa, it was something to do with vehicles, and his legal team, successfully as it turns out, argued that those vehicles couldn't possibly have been state property because they were on a lease and the ultimate ownership lay with the finance company. Is that good?
Well, that's a disputable matter because there was a question of ownership and a question of lease rights.
Yeah.
So that if the lease rights were with the state, then it becomes state property on a temporary basis. So those are arguable matters. I don't think those things should be decided prematurely, because I think all such facts should be laid for us before court, and court should be the ultimate arbiter on those matters.
Yeah.
But really, if you take cases as it is, we see the avant-garde case, we had suddenly the police action where they were initiated on the basis of the Explosive Act, the Firearms Act, the Penal Code, and the Prevention of Terrorism Act. And then the AG goes and says very correctly, I think, though belatedly, that there is no possibility of maintaining charges. Now, what is interesting is who took the initial step of taking it to court on that basis is one or the other authority, that is either the police or the Attorney General. So, but nobody is revealing who did it. They are trying to take the credit after it was correctly decided by the Attorney General. That is premature. But what is interesting for us is all these matters, why is it that there is this urgency, this rush to judgment? Because I think it is to get some political mileage.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with you, Mr. Dashi, on that. I think that the urgency has been fueled by none other than the politicians themselves. They've used this to secure power for themselves, and they have actually misled, in that case, the public, because the public are expecting action. And in fact, if you stretch a point, I think this is tantamount to a breach of trust, because the public were told that there was large-scale corruption, and not one of these fellows have been brought up and hauled before a court of law. We've had people who've been selectively put in remand and released, sometimes spending some time in the prison hospital. But there have been no results per se, and I think the public are expecting results.
And I think politicians should stop playing politics with the lives of the people and the truth. And then, so that's really questionable.
And you see, the other matter, Mr. Dashi, I have is that we are told that 3 other officials at the Attorney General's Department had actually wished to go, their thought process was that there could be a successful prosecution. And yet the Attorney General appears to have acted solo and gone on some solo adventure.
I don't have any inside information as to who went solo, who went dual, or who went public. But the fact is, I think the Attorney General would have examined all relevant facts, and he had the courage to say there is no charge. But what is interesting is that doesn't mean the end of the story, because you still can go before the Presidential Commission, you can go before the Bribery Commission, and those matters should be investigated, because this is not purely a matter of criminal nature. It has got a civil complexion, it's got abuse of power, it's got probably negligence. So several aspects are there. And all those things should be investigated. But one more matter for us. Now we send everybody to remand or take them into custody. But what, don't you think there is corruption and abuse of power when they end up in hospital or in the prison or in the general hospital?
Well, I don't know. I think it's such a shock to these poor souls that the shock is too much for them to handle.
But then do you think the medical profession is also collaborating or conniving?
Well, those are matters, but this is almost traditional that if you are having some modicum of power, even if it's reflected power, in terms of children and spouse and so on, you tend to go to the hospital.
And they have a good time in this hospital. So that is where the masses are not happy with it. What happens if the common man does it? He's harassed and abused, but all these politicians, they're still having a good time.
Bandula, but still, courts have an overriding power. They could inquire whether the entry to hospital is genuine or not, because if you look at the thing broadly, every person of eminence or prominence ends up in hospital, while poor people are sent into remand and have to spend years. So what is this discrimination? And that is a thing I think courts can well check, but they have failed to check.
Yeah, now coming back for us the question on the avant-garde, now see, if the Attorney General had not closed the case...
Strange. I was going to say the same thing.
Great mind thinks alike,
Indeed,
Okay. If the avant-garde, if the Attorney General had not closed the case, not given back the passport, the latest incident wouldn't have happened. What are your thoughts?
Possibly, because I think the Attorney General or whoever went premature in filing charges and went premature in withdrawing. I think in both ends they did the same mistake. Because in these matters, end of the day, it's the government who gets the big stick wielded against them. If they discredit, the purpose is to bring glory to the government by rushing in with action and rushing out in the same way. End of the day, the bad name is reflected in the state.
Mr. Vidura Vikramanayaka's statement 2 or 3 days ago on this show springs to mind. He said, this is not the actions of a bull in the china shop. He said it's the actions of a, what was it?
Buffalo.
Buffalo in the china shop. He was, of course, talking about someone else. But
maybe he likes this song, Buffalo Soldier.
Buffalo Soldier, indeed. Now, the thing is, I think we must go to the beginning of these matters. And the beginning in this case, in this sad saga of the avant-garde matter, is that the former establishment, the former Defense Secretary, we'll have to blame him because he was in charge, decided to award this contract, to enter into an agreement with avant-garde without this cursory transparency procedures. There was no expression of interest, there was no request for proposal, there was no tender. It was some solo, what now has become a misadventure. Because you see, we have a written constitution. You have as much right as I do, as much as Mr. Daisiri does. In that case, the other 20 or 30 players in this field in Sri Lanka were left out. And if we were so enamored and so wanting to make this an effective and transparent process and to make the maximum out of this, they could have called for an international tender. There are more than 160 private maritime security companies around the world. And they didn't do that.
But I think for us it's power. It happens to everybody. It can happen to you, Gomin, or anybody, even the present regime. This is where the problem. When you have absolute power, it's no good.
I think they failed to keep the eye on the ball, and which is why what happened on the 9th of January happened.
But there's a flip side also for us. I think they were thinking of finding employments, keeping people in the forces, otherwise occupied.
Well, why couldn't they do that with the? I mean, let's say company A is avant-garde and company B is company B. Company B would have also had to have drawn on those very people, because you need that kind of person to provide security. You need someone with a armed background.
But for us, to add, with your permission, now I met some Navy officers at a function, and they said, you don't have to give it to the private sector, where in the past Navy could have done it, the Sri Lankan Navy, and those monies, they would have used it for the welfare and other things. They would have, so the money went out to the private sector. That was the problem.
And I take this on that we need not have gone international, we should have gone national. And the other thing is, this kind of transaction should first have been referred to the Attorney General as to whether the contract is in one piece.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Actually, we've forgotten another point. The Attorney General says that the case is still very much on. This sort of conflicting news here.
Isn't it more accurate says on and off? Isn't that what the Attorney General is saying? He's sometimes saying on, and then it says it's on at the Primary Commission, it's on at the Special Presidential Commission, it's off in the Magistrates'
There was a film which I think was shown many years ago at the New Olympia then. It was called Blow Hot, Blow Cold. So I don't know if this matter is a bit blow hot, blow cold. But what I want to ask you from a legal perspective, the Attorney General has said no case. What does that mean? These people are going to get away with it?
No. Attorney General said no case as regards 4 statutes that were before court. That's the Firearms Act, Explosives Act, Prevention of Terrorism Act, and the Penal Act. Virtually the whole of the criminal law. But that doesn't mean it's off, because there are civil matters that has to be inquired. There's abuse of power, there's corruption. Those things also require inquiry, and those are going on. That is why, as you correctly said, the Attorney General is doing hot and cold.
But the police inquiry is still on.
That is on because police can inquire into civil matters. For example, what is going on before the Special Presidential Commission. It's the police who investigate. But what I would like to know is, still that's not disclosed. Who went to the magistrate's court and made that complaint, sitting out 4 statutes under which Attorney General very correctly says he cannot prosecute.
But we have the statement or some report from the Deputy Attorney General, Sobita Rajakaruna, who says, or who's on record as having said, that you cannot take action on matters where the permission of the Minister of Defence has been obtained. Then my question to you is, does the Minister of Defence, he is allowed to do away and dispense with various rules in place?
That's a very short answer. He can do what is lawful, but if it is unlawful, nobody is above the law, including the Ministry of Defence. I think it's a statement that he has made in the light of the in the question if the minister or any person does something within his lawful authority, but many things are done outside that premise, so that such inquiry could go on against any person who acts in excess of his powers.
I think the Attorney General is squirming and squealing now because he's wriggling actually, because the public are getting different sort of messages. They're getting this message and that message, and he's apparently got the scripture wrong, hasn't he? But what I want to know is this: don't you think, Mr. Dasri, that we should get our producer Kamal to call Sobita Rajakaruna?
Or even Yuan Jun, the Attorney General himself.
Or we can ask the Attorney General himself, and he can come and stand right where you are, and he can tell us all.
I think the Attorney General has been very forthright. He said that he's come open, and I think he should be transparent. You should give him a right of hearing, because there are many accusations being thrown at him. So he has to answer, and this would be an excellent forum for him to answer. You invite him. Let's see whether he comes. If he doesn't, well, he has to take the response. If he comes, he could explain himself.
Well, he's certainly going to be at the receiving end of a telephone call from this network this morning. No sooner he braves the weather and gets into his office.
Or even his spokesman, he can send his representative to...
Indeed. But because some people do say that we must see the contracts with Avant-Garde redrawn. I've had sight of this, actually, of the 7th one, which is a consolidation of the other 6 agreements. There are some absolutely marvelous points there. One of them, which sticks in my mind, is that if this contract is cancelled for any reason at all, the government shall pay Avant-Garde $20 million within 60 days. Another golden nugget from that same contract is that the government will meet all expenses 50-50. Now,
that's not fair by the
I
government.
Couldn't find
Who
anywhere,
would do that?
I couldn't find anywhere how much the government is going to get back in terms of profit. It's a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, because it's like it's not to the advantage of the government.
Yes.
So that you don't give it like that, give it away like that.
Well, tomorrow we, as you announced on your show, you have the Secretary of Defence coming tomorrow. We can ask him firsthand what it is.
There's a lot to ask him,
But it's a sad situation, isn't it, Mr. Dasri and Bandula, that in spite of the constitutional provisions in this country on equality, that none of these other companies thought it proper or fit to actually go to the Supreme Court and complain. And that brings to my mind what President Kumaratunga once told us, that there is a fear psychosis in this country. And that was, of course, during the previous regime.
I would say, there was, she also cannot make statements like that. Okay, there were fear psychosis during her time, but coming back here...
I reminded her that Mr. Lasantha Wickrematunge was attacked twice under her watch. but unfortunately she asked me under whose watch he lost his life.
Yeah. But that's not a clear
That's
answer.
not an answer.
That's not an answer.
And I think the main thing is, do you agree, Mr. Darcy, that there is an urgent need for whoever is responsible for this matter, for approving these matters, they must be brought to book and held accountable?
It's not sad, it's bewildering to me, for a reason that if all this could have been rectified, would have had one simple answer: if these matters were referred to the Attorney General, because then nobody could be blamed. They could have said, well, I got the opinion from the highest authority. That was not done. And in the circumstances, I think it's best that the matter is opened wide open and all aspects are looked, so that there is no recurrence, or if the people are innocent, they are set free.
Well, what I want to say too, on the same point that you bring up about referring matters to the Attorney General. For instance, when the CEB, the Central Ceylon Electricity Board, enters into contracts with contractors, there's a whole big file which is the legal stuff, which is sent to the AG, the whole contract sent to the AG for the AG's opinion and so on. And then they enter into the contract. But it is very rare that I have read anywhere that the CEB have actually resorted to those provisions in terms of penalties. You know, you get contractors who have ordered jobs and then they don't supply the right amount of power, or they don't meet the contract. And then there is no kind of recourse to the legal provisions that have been passed by the Attorney General anyway.
And also for us, that people go unpunished. You know, this is what, you know, only the ordinary people are punished. The decision makers, they are not punished. So this has to end.
But the problem is sometimes these things are sent to the Attorney General delay. It's not attended. So they are in that situation. So you have to look at both sides. I mean, sending to Attorney General may mean you get a cover, but that cover is not open because they delay beyond time limits.
Well, my point is, if they're not going to invoke any of these legal provisions in the contract, why waste time initially going to the Attorney General anyway? Because it only delays that project by that amount of time. Now, if you've sent your contract and it's been approved by the Attorney General and you've got the cover, as Mr. Darcy says, then you must be able to exercise that cover when the time is right, when it's needed, when a contractor doesn't deliver upon what he has promised to do.
For us, there is a problem there because being the highest legal officer, the state can only go to the Attorney General in the first instance, and thereafter can look at other resorts, because you see the question of payment comes in, and the Attorney General is not paid for state of our efforts, but certainly if it's a semi-state effort, the Attorney General does get paid. The unfortunate thing is the Attorney General's Department, due to inadequacy of people or inadequacy of time factor, doesn't act within the time limits offered.
Just to break the monotony of this morning's show, and where we've been talking almost exclusively on avant-garde, is another matter, and that is the statement from the Central Bank, our friends at the Central Bank, who've now issued a statement on these transfers, and they have said that these transfers are routine, and under the rules they can transfer these people to any office in the country that they wish them to go to. Well, we know that, but our complaint, and that of Mr. Dinesh Gunawardena before he was shot down by the Prime Minister, was that these transfers appear to be lopsided, because many of the people who gave evidence before CORP appear to have been at the receiving end.
And also, why the Prime Minister got so excited, so worried about it?
Indeed.
You know, why was that?
And very unparliamentary language, and so unlike our dear Prime Minister, isn't it?
Right, so I think the thing is that when it's on television, everybody wants to get his voice or his face into it.
That was the first day that they were
so you must
broadcasting.
be so probably the behavior was such, and I suppose as television coverage increases, the behavior may become worse.
So you think the Prime Minister tried to do some acting or trying to rehearse for something?
I think everybody's acting nowadays.
Do you know, I want to say this. If I remember rightly, I think there is a minister who is now a minister, but who acted for avant-garde, you know. And I wonder if that's, how does that work? If you represented somebody before, and then you end up as a minister, how should you handle
one of your colleagues, right? He's one of your legal...
You don't want to mention any names.
No names, but they should be detached. They should not put their hands into it whatsoever. They should not comment. They should give that file over to somebody else to make the decisions.
Perhaps to the deputy minister.
Deputy minister or to any person, but not himself. They should stay well away because they are prejudiced and biased.
Well, you know, if that happens in this case, Bandula, I should be taking the entire newsroom out on my account if that happens. If it happens inside the next 90 days, I should take them all out from you.
So why do you say not 90 days, 30 days?
Okay, we'll make it 30 days.
Yeah, because, you know...
30 days. In 30 days. You can join me too if it happens. All right?
Do you think are you living in hope? You think it'll happen, or...?
I'm so confident that that it's a considered wager that I know that I won't have to pay out.
That's sad for the public.
For the news flow, it is.
Yeah, but it's sad for the public, you know, if it's not going to happen.
You must never take a sure bet.
The only thing is, I must say, on almost the last bits of this program, is that the former army commander, now Field Marshal Sarat Fonseca, is complaining bitterly that no action has been taken on corruption. Field Marshal Fonseca sometimes does have the ability to press the button right where it matters.
And it was a wonderful speech over the weekend. I listened to that, you know, which he spoke of corruption. Very good, very aggressive.
Okay.
He was at his best.
What do you think happened to him? Why didn't the public grant him more than the 10,000 or whatever?
It's difficult to say, you know. It's very difficult to say. He could reach out more, but
I think the Republic, the Mahajanata, the people who we urged to vote well, and I think they did, are not ready to hand Sri Lanka over to somebody with a military background. They're quite happy with Ranil, or with Mahinda, or the Honourable President Sirisena.
Yeah, but sometimes these so-called democratic leaders, also the way the Prime Minister behaved in the Parliament, you know, as if he was from the military, right? Or the language he used.
You know, talking of Greek marbles and so on, and tragic bonds and all that, I think that, unfortunately, the Honourable and the very dear Prime Minister appears to have lost his marbles.
You're friends with him now, right?
Well, I mean, we feel sorry for him, but it may be the pressure of having been out of power for so long. On that note, we run out of time, sadly. And thank you very much, Mr. Dasi, for being with us on this network. And Bandula, thank you.
Thank you, Paras.
And leave you with this little thought for the day, on this wet but warm day. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Don't you agree? On that note, I wish you a very good morning and God bless.